Okay, so for this session, I have the pleasure of introducing our little talk, which is not going to be confused by slides because we haven't got any. So I just challenge is doing it in 15 minutes because we've got a lot we'd like to say and share with you. But I just wanted to situate the talk and say we're not academics. To start with, if we were sort of to talk at all in academic language, what we've been doing for 15 years, you could conceive as action research. So we've been investing money and time in projects, many of which have not stopped. They're still going on today. So we've sort of thrown a lot out there to really see what sticks. So we're going to. The paper we submitted was called the Commons Fund. This is the current fund project that we're working on. This project has sort of been 15 years in gestation and is a result of the learning that we've had from our own investments and time in this sort of action research approach. And we are not just going to talk about the money, although the Commons Fund is very much focused on private capital. So as opposed to government funding or trust or grant funding, we're in exploring and developing channels in private capital. But there's many more things that we've found along the way that really informs the approach we're taking to the Commons Fund. So a health warning, the Commons Fund is neither universal nor unconditional. What we really have learned is that what we're interested in return is not debt or equity, but the stories that come out from cash transfer. So it's a really sort of a storytelling approach. And therefore, I'd introduce myself and get Annabelle to introduce herself in terms of our stories and how we got here. But there's another couple of things we wanted to mention on governance, bureaucracy, etc. So I'm one of the founders of Ethos, which was set up 24 years ago. Three of us met when we were in EY, which is one of these accountancy management consultancy firms back in 1997 or 8. And there's a third founder who's more of a granddad now, but he's still involved part-time with the business. Although I'm a IT graduate and geekdom is kind of where I've come from, that I decided I didn't want to be a partner in EY. I got very frustrated with bureaucracy and looking at, internal focus rather than what problem we're trying to solve. So how can we've got to do bureaucracy and governance, but how can we do minimum viable bureaucracy and governance so that we don't become internally focused? And that is a sort of lesson we wanted to share in terms of some stuff we've learned there. But if you cut my arm off, you could say I'm a bit of an anti-bureaucrat. We're doing bureaucracy all the time, but you have to do it. But it's like, how do you minimize it? Annabelle?
So can you hear me yet? I'm Annabelle Lambert. I always start my introduction with I'm mother. I've got 2 kids, which I do, 15 and 19. But my journey started 25 years ago. He lied. It's 25 years ago. When I had a moment where I sort of understood that I could do whatever I wanted to do. That's not easy to do, obviously, it's a glib statement, but I had a moment where I was empowered, given permission, and understood that, actually what I was doing and where I was going in the world was about me. I could put myself back at the center of that. And on that, with that thought and that mindset, then went on to, well, how can one help other people experience that? And for the last 25 years, underlying all the social value projects that Ethos has been involved with, there's been this sort of practice that we have developed, still developing, but at a healthy stage now, called Value Exchange, which is all about putting individuals back at the center of who they are, encouraging people, a bit like sort of yoga, really. It is a discipline to think and reflect on what you've been doing, and then convene with the people that are around you, who people who are on your journey with you, and then think about, well, what is it I'm now going to do in short amounts of time, no more than 3 months, because you can't remember what you were doing 6 months ago generally. So and underlying all that, understanding that actually life is just one life, and you know, everything that you experience will impact everything else. So allowing for that as well. So what I would call real flexibility, which is like, you know, if I need to take the dog to the vets, then I will do that. And nobody's going to make me feel guilty about that. I will get, you know, I'm working with people who understand that I will achieve the outcomes that we've agreed we're going to achieve together. And how and when I do that is really up to me. So been on this journey, and also understanding how you're going to finance what it is that you're doing, as this is a finance session. You know, where is the money going to come from? What, you know, how am I, what does that mean for me? You know, is this something I'm doing volunteering that means something massive to me, or do I need to be paid for it? Those sorts of questions that we don't sort of ask ourselves when we release that inner, like, well, what gives me meaning? Where am I going? What am I doing with my time? Is what this is about. And in the pandemic, we took a huge leap and worked with 65 young people on a project called Young Leaders, which I'll come to later, which really sort of tested the system for us, because we'd all been getting a lot older and rather privileged and had made a choice. But with young people who don't have that choice, it was a fantastic experiment, which we'll talk about later. So back to you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about two investment projects, you know, amongst 25 that we've been involved with the last 15 years. The first one is the Wellbeing Through Sport program, and then the second one, Young Leaders. So just two, and then we'll talk about, you know, the sort of why of the Commons Fund. So 15 years ago, we worked with the armed forces. So it was a sort of time where lots of people were losing limbs, psychological damage, but also just the sort of the people well-being. So we worked with, it was about 43, 45 charities at the time, who were all, you may have heard of Help for Heroes or some of the more famous brands that were financing that. But actually the distribution of income was very, very polarized towards, like any sort of income distribution, the big players in sport, and the little people who were not, you know, found it incredibly difficult to finance any activity that was well-being through sport. So we kind of got a collaboration going, and then lots of governance issues, lots of sort of, you know, stresses and strains. And so a charity structure was set up, a for-profit was set up, a mechanism to look at private finance of how we would get businesses to sponsor, and all the profit would go into well-being through sport. That's still running today, 15 years later. It's generating £1 million plus of profit every year, and that money is all pushed to the people who participate in this sort of the well-being through physical activity. What we learned most was that we did the governance, and it was horrendous and horrific, but we never really lost sight on the beneficiaries. And between Annabelle's story of the people-centric piece and you know, minimizing the bureaucracy, we were able to create a system that was pretty resilient to knocks. And what we found in all of the projects is that this bit, it's sort of motherhood and apple pie, but you know, getting people alignment and keeping them focused on the outcome and not the bureaucracy tends to be, you know, our biggest challenge on anything we do. So that's project number one. Quickly going to move on now to Young Leaders.
So quickly, Young Leaders. So just before the pandemic, actually, as an organisation, we'd been 22 years into our journey as to what we were doing. But we'd always positioned ourselves as a future of work organisation. And we've been keen for quite a long time to get more young people, because as I said, we were all 20 years older than when we started, and not looking necessarily like the future, but wanted to work with some more young people, understand whether this was, you know, something that people that of a younger age could engage with, we could make real. So just before the pandemic, we went out into the market to see if we could find some people who wanted to come and experiment with us. Then the pandemic hit, and we were given a wonderful opportunity to make some investment into, in the end, it turned out being 65 young people who we were able to just give a minimum wage to, so basic income, to come and spend at least 6 months with us. Some stayed longer, but worked with a cohort, as I said, of 65 young people, varying from people who had achieved highly at Russell Group universities, very academically able, but sort of disenfranchised with what was open and available, plus add the pandemic on top of that. So, you know, access to work was limited anyway. To people who were so far from the work system, who were ex-offenders, who were county lines drugs in the UK, and created this most amazing cohort of young people all looking to support each other. But the intent was give them a minimum wage, drop them into this system of it's all about you, and see what happened. And it was exhausting, stressful, but also amazing what journeys they all went on. Every single one experienced their own thing. It was all about them, but giving them sort of the space, the time, and the finance to just go on their own journey with a, you know, a light support network of mentoring and just a framework of people. Then it was a most amazing journey. And when it came to an end, Rob and I and others took some time then to consider what we had learned from that, as well as everything and everybody. It's all about people at the end of the day that we'd worked with for the last 15 years, and which has now taken us on a journey of, well, actually, this is a really quite different way of approaching things and work and people. And if we can empower, enable people, more people through this way, then maybe life can be different. We can create different jobs, we can create different work, we can create different impact in community. So, and I'm now going to hand back to Rob. He's going to talk about where we are now with the Commons Fund, which is, I don't know, 8 months into its existence. So,
yeah. So the learning was that in the past, we would manage these projects. There would be our projects and programs to deliver. We would have to raise finance, not just our own money, but sometimes that would be government money. Sometimes it would be private capital, sometimes business sponsorship. So that Team Army I talked about, you know, that was 15 million of profits it made to then donate through its model. The most stressful money tended to be government money, because there was so many strings attached. You know, there was sort of like competitions of hundreds of organizations vying to say, choose me, choose me. When you win, the bureaucracy that comes with a grant, you know, can be more than the energy required to actually deliver a change in the community. So we said, well, you know, how would we finance what we're doing at scale? Do we need to project manage more? No. Could we actually just let the community at the very lowest level, you know, manage these projects? The talent is out there in spades if we just believe in the people. Let's just focus on the money. Let's focus on, you know, private capital. And back to how on earth would we finance universal basic income? My opinion, it's an opinion, not an academic, or an economist, is that figure $650 trillion of global wealth. A tiny wood shaving of that amount would finance an awful lot of progressive investment in people. Who do I mean? There's 1.5 billion people that live outside of our economy globally. So we decided with the Commons Fund, we would focus on family offices, rich, you know, ultra high net worth individuals, you know, private equity, venture capital. And we also have been convinced to go back to sponsorship as well. So the Commons Fund basically is our energy going out to the market to finance now these programs, which come to us in the form of projects. Our interest is not financing them forever. So we've got some, you know, criteria, but we don't require the debt. We don't require it to be debt or equity like our previous programs. We are looking just to get the stories back. So we're making grants to projects that would last for 2 years and finance small groups of people who are doing things that are around people and planet well-being. So that could be, in the case of our last pandemic, you know, program, we did a program which was working with 300,000 people in the UK police force. It was a really big, you know, public service scheme. You know, we've got a global portfolio now of 30 approaching 30 projects that is growing every week. And they're from South American rainforest to projects in South Africa, to Europe, to all over the world. And the diversity that we're getting from sort of doing these tiny experiments everywhere, the knowledge that we're getting from communities are fantastic. And the challenge, of course, is this is a thirsty beast in terms of our work of releasing the capital. So I think that really runs into our let's not talk for more than 15 minutes exactly. Yeah, time kept myself. So I'd welcome questions.